All right, guys, welcome back to Fully Human. I'm your host, Taylor Sleaford, and today we have Zach Fagerberg. Zach is a fitness coach, personal trainer, mindset, nutrition, all the things.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. This is our first chance to be together in person. We've known each other for 6 months or so now, so
Yeah,
it's been great to get a chance to be together in person
crazy.
again.
Yeah, it's crazy how that is. We had some mutual friends. It's funny, we've been talking today about the internet and social media and kind of some of the challenges, but there's a lot of beautiful things.
There is,
We're
man.
connected with mutual friends, and you're in the men's group now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm stoked to connect. You mentioned double breakfast. I want to hear more about that. So you wake up at 4 a.m. every day.
Yes, sir. Okay. This is one of those things that I feel like is wrong with the fitness industry, right? Like 4 a.m. is the goal. 8 out of 10 days, that's when I wake up.
Yeah.
There are totally days when I get up at like more reasonable hours. And I think that, like, yeah, for people listening or what, like, it doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
the 4 a.m. every day. But yes, that's what I shoot for. I'm usually training by 4:30 or 5. So I have a meal before I train. For me, a large part of training has always been adding or keeping muscle mass because I was naturally a really lean dude growing up. And so putting fuel in before I train is really, really important for me. That's usually a pretty easy, like, just oatmeal shake that I throw some protein powder in, some peanut butter in, maybe some egg whites. And then after I train, I'll grab like a real sit-down breakfast, which is eggs, potatoes, usually a big bowl of mixed fruit.
Wow. I'm like I don't really eat breakfast. Kind of intermittent fasting, but not super like planned.
Okay.
I like drinking coffee in the morning, so I don't have a big appetite, and then which gets a little tricky. If I work out early enough, it's usually fasted. But I don't have the same goals as you.
That's fair.
Getting big.
I think that's the determining factor in how you eat, how you train, what the goals are. So I can remember the days where I thought, like, oh, if you're not trying to get big or you're not doing what I'm doing, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we all have our own.
I still have Anthony, who's also in the men's group, is a bodybuilder.
Yep.
And I love CrossFit, and pretty much our whole message interaction in Instagram is like him sending me videos making fun of CrossFitters and me sending him ones making fun of bodybuilders. And so it's I think with my background in fitness, it's like ultimately training for whatever you like is the best thing. So it's interesting because I know we were talking about it in the car, I'm like, I don't know how you wake up so early, but it's like finding what you like and what works for you. And you were mentioning that working out early starts your day off well.
Yeah, man, I think that's one of the biggest things that I try to encourage anyone in my space of expertise is that, like, there's so many things out there, like, you do this to get the best results, you do that to get the best results. And, like, science tells us that whatever you can do consistently is what gets you the best results.
Yeah.
You don't need to feel bad that, like, you're not doing whatever the new thing is that everyone says to do. Like,
Right.
What you can do consistently, I think, at least in my personal experience, my coaching experience, leads you to success in the health and wellness.
Yeah,
world.
which is tough in the world of shiny objects and jumping from ship to ship.
Getting shinier and shinier.
Yeah, it's
Getting better and better at changing the wiring of this guy to go with the shiny objects.
Yeah, so you mentioned goals, right? Your goals with training, and obviously that's something you work with clients. I'm curious, did you set goals like for this year? Do you have an intention? Do you have like a focus? Maybe fitness or even personally?
Yeah, so this probably will sound weird for people, like, you're a fitness coach and these are what your goals sound like, because they're not super specific. They're not super measurable, which is a lot of things that people tell you is effective when you goal set. I find that the first mandatory of training for me, whether it's in the weight room or on the trail, is challenging my capacity. If I'm doing what I can already do, I feel like I'm not getting the biggest crux of the biscuit from my training. And it's not that I continue to grow physically or change physically.
Yeah.
It's like what that space does for you mentality wise, how that grows your mindset, regularly experiencing that. So, in the weight room, I think PRs are definitely a part of that process. I think trail running this year is something that I'm keeping under wraps, but I have some big personal goals for myself that are things I've not done before. And again, I think that that's a place where our society is like, well, let me tell you about what the cool things are I'm going to do this year. And I'm just really focused on like, they'll be really cool for me when I do them because they were really for me.
Yeah, there's a big part of me that wants to like pull it out of you. And I also have, I have this tension between, I think sometimes like not sharing things, not sharing goals, like letting yourself it like be for you and you have that drive can be powerful. And then I think sometimes it's like putting it out there in the world is also powerful, and I think this also depends on the person,
Totally.
and what they need. But yeah, it's cool. I have respect for that because I was training for a 100-mile race and I'm no longer training. And I think, there were a number of reasons. I think I got swept up a little bit in the idea of it. And really for me, I've never had a desire to run that far, let alone a 50-miler or a 40-miler. But I like doing hard things, and I viewed it as like this experience, this journey of like, who am I going to be on the other side of it? So I was viewing it more as like a personal growth tool. And then the group I was going to do with it was a team. There were, 12 of us that were going to do it. And it didn't quite line up with the training, and there wasn't as much as a team aspect as I had hoped. So it wasn't quite what I thought. And the time commitment was too much. But even with that, the background I haven't had enough of an idea of what it was. And still it's like, I think actually, if I'm being honest, I was using it as a crutch to like create some kind of sense of meaning or purpose, where like I was kind of grasping for like in that season of my life. And that felt like it could give me that meaning. Yeah. So I definitely have a lot of respect for just like, okay, I know I want to do this. And also like, I'm going to keep it close to my heart.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I think, there were even parts of me that are like, well, I'll give you a little, but last year I read a book from a good friend called The Comfort Crisis. And in the book, the author talks about this concept of a misogi.
Dude, that's literally, I was viewing the 100-miler as my misogi.
I love it. And so part of the misogi, right, is not just shouting it from the rooftops. Part of the misogi is it being your journey. And I believe that through buying into that, I will have some things that I can share very authentically on the back end of the experience. But me being able to reflect and share those things authentically comes from me being able to be here and present in the moment to experience and absorb it all.
Wow, I love that you said that. My last guest was my neighbor. Her name's Caitlin. She's a business coach. And, she helps people grow their business and on social media and has a marketing agency, but is very authentic, right? She'll talk about her life or some challenges or relationship struggles or things like that. But she does it in a way that is like, feels like it's being open and honest, but not like, I don't know, a video of her crying in the bathroom where it's like, you had to set the camera up to capture that, which that's my own judgment. If you're triggered from that, sorry, not sorry. But one thing she shared was, things like that, or, sickness within a family, or, things like that. She'll wait, it won't be like the thing happened that day. It might be a week or a month or, where she's processed it before sharing it, and that was something that I was thinking about that's cool, where it's like, not letting the emotions get to you and sharing in the moment. Cause I think like you're probably not fully ready to share, and also like how you want to share it and like processing it, and like we've been talking about this all day today. We went on a hike of like, what is our intention with, we use social media a lot, but it doesn't even have to be social media. It could be friends that you're hanging out with. Like, are you just emotionally dumping what you're saying to like just make it about you or feel heard? Or is it like, hey, I want to share this because it's important? And so like that made sense to me of like the vulnerable stuff, but I even like what you're saying here, where you can actually, when you do start to talk about it, you can have the full picture, the 10,000 foot view, instead of just like, which I don't think there's a right or wrong. Like for me, the 100-miler, I wanted to like share the journey.
Yes.
And I was sharing the training. And there was definitely times where I was like, oh, this will be a dope video. I'm running in the snow and it's a blizzard and I ran 20 miles, look at me,
Yeah.
you know? And you can get caught up in that. And so like, that's just a cool perspective to think about with like what you share. And um, I think even going back to some of the conversation we had earlier today of like, we get to craft the narrative, you know? So like, yeah, so what, this happened a month ago or a year ago? Like we can, there's still value in sharing that story and the impact. And so yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that.
Of course, man. I think the other thing that I would really, like, I'm striving for this year in terms of ripples to those around me is I think that, you know, if I were on the receiving end watching this, you know, my first question is, well, what are you doing? Right? And what's the experience? And like, truly, if I don't say, the only way you can figure out is to go do something.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like we're with, you know, some of our conversations around social today, one of the negative aspects of it is we all get this high of talking about doing the thing. Right? And that's starting to become more and more of like people are being tricked into thinking they're doing the thing just because they talk about doing the thing so much. And so if I don't talk about it, but you still want the experience, you're only left with go do it yourself.
Yeah, and I think what's cool about that is I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for other people, but I see this pattern in the world is we get caught up in doing what others are doing. You know, so even for me, I was looking for that thing for that misogi. And the group that I was in, it was like, yeah, they're doing triathlons and Ironmans and 100 milers. And I'm like, I just don't love it that much. Like the mistake I made was I would never do that by myself. I only did it, actually did it for the community, you know, which is funny because these conversations around community, I've changed my mind recently where I used to think like, oh, join something for the community, somewhere that has a great community. But I actually think that's the wrong intention. Join something because you love it and you'll find the right community. And I think about CrossFit, like CrossFit has changed a lot over the years. And I think it's really known for having community within the gym.
Yes.
A cult-like following, which like I think is actually a positive thing for people to say.
Yeah,
you know,
for
you
sure.
can hate on it if you want. And early on when I was coaching CrossFit full time, I used to be like, oh yeah, the community, that's a main reason to join or whatever. But actually nobody joins for the community. They join, that's like a byproduct. That's actually what keeps them. They join because they want to get fit or they want to do something hard or like, you know, it looks cool or whatever. And the analogy that stuck with me is like, you know, you and I like fitness and we like outdoors and things like that. And if we are looking for a community, we're not going to go join a knitting club.
Yeah.
You know, but someone might tell us, oh, this knitting club has the best community. And it's like, well, yeah, but those aren't our people, you know? And so I think that was the awareness I had where like, I do love doing hard things in fitness, but like, I don't love running enough. And that's where it became this like challenging point that I didn't actually, like it looked good on paper, but it wasn't actually like my misogi of like something that, man, I've been dying to do this. Cause there's other people who like, no matter what, they want to run 100 miles one day, you know? And so that's what's kind of cool in this is you can share about why you're doing it. You can share about what the meaning of it is, but giving people space to think for themselves, like, what is my hard version? Because also, like, again, I don't know what you're doing, but if it's, let's just say it's 50 miles, you know, for some people, a half marathon might be that same level of difficulty.
Totally. And just for, you know, if people who are listening to this aren't familiar with misogi, one of the big aspects of it is a 50-50 fail pass rate, right? Like roughly. There should be a 50% chance you can succeed, 50% chance you might not succeed.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the real cruxes of the biscuit. And I think that, yeah, like think about something that puts you in that thought process of 50% self-doubt. And imagine not telling a soul and going and doing it one day. Like that just gives me, that gave me goosebumps, you know, like that, don't tell me, like just that's exciting to me. Like that's as present as you'll ever be in life. That's as like, yeah, that's just satisfying to think about to me, which satisfaction in the human design world is how I operate when I'm in my zone. But
yeah, that's so good because I don't know, we can just get so caught up in like showing people and telling people and it's like, it really is the journey with that whole 50-50. And what's interesting about my 100 miler is I actually signed up and I chose to do this because of who I would become. You know, we've talked about today, like matching the frequency of like your higher self. And I really believe that like you take actions today based on the future you that you want to be, right? So like For example, for the men's group, I have the pack, which is like the continuation membership. And for the longest time, I was like, oh, I'm going to get on Circle, which is this online platform where you can post videos and courses and all this stuff. And I'm like, but I'm going to wait till I have, 30 guys, 40 guys, whatever it is. It's like, when this happens, then I'll do this. And then it was like, no, I'm going to do it now. And that's what's going to bring in the guys and the people, And so I viewed this 100 miler the same way of like, I don't know fully who I'm going to be, but like my highest self does really hard, challenging things, does Misogis, And what's interesting is me quitting was actually the hardest thing. I don't know if you relate to this. I think this is true for a lot of men where we just will be the martyr. We will just self-abandon and self-sacrifice ourselves to something that we committed to. And I realized that one of my shadows is I get so angry when people don't follow through with their word or they don't commit to things. I'm like, well, you're upset, you're not getting what you want, but you're not showing up. You're not coming to the gym, you're showing up late, whatever it is. And anytime there's something that we get upset in others, there's a reflection to look back on. And I realized the reason that was a shadow is because I couldn't do that for myself. Like if I signed up for something, if I told someone I was going to, their barbecue next weekend and I'm like stressed and busy and all this stuff is happening, like I will still go because I said I was going to be there, And so the same thing with the 100 miler is like, even though I was becoming miserable with my schedule and I kept thinking to myself like, oh, I can't wait till May. I can't wait, for months from now when that's over, which I don't want to live my life that way. And it's all because like this fear of like letting people down or like this story of how people might view me or being a quitter. And I realized it was an opportunity to let go of that shadow, let go of that operating system and like give myself permission to like quit something, because it's actually what was best for me. It was no longer in alignment. I had other priorities that I wanted to focus on. And then I was recording a podcast on that. And then I realized, oh, that was the thing. That was what I was supposed to glean from this. Like I still got it. And that's what's crazy about putting ourselves out there in like a Misogi and the, 50-50 fail rate is like, sometimes failing is like where all the learning is.
Dude, I couldn't agree more that I think, especially men, we struggle with the martyrdom, For me, it was bodybuilding. When I first started to find that world and find confidence from putting muscle on, it became very egotistical. It became very gravitational. And it was like, I'm going to compete. I'm going to be damn good at it too.
I'm going to be huge.
And I was about 10 weeks out from my first show, about 4 to 6 weeks into dieting part of prep, which is where the mental games start. And I was driving to work one morning. And I had just been so like, eating is miserable, training is miserable, and I was bought into the fact that like the more misery there is, the better I am going to be. That's a direct correlation.
Yeah.
And
slippery slope.
One morning was driving to work, fell asleep at the wheel and didn't wake up until I was hitting dirt on the other side. And my brain's instant response was like, I don't know if that would have been that bad. And I just kind of like pulled back to the other side of the road and kept driving to work. And as I went through that day at work, it like really started to dawn on me that like, this is a massive red flag, dude. Like you could have injured someone else. You could have injured yourself. And like your thoughts were complete apathy. And I actually that evening checked myself into a mental crisis facility in Fort Collins because I've had friends close to me that I've lost to suicide. And I know that once the red flags start to come, like you may think you're in the driver's seat, but like there's a point where you need help. And I had to realize that like, dude, you will die on this stick, on this sword. Like you need to take a step back and release this, like I committed to competing. And that's what my life has been about for the last 3 or 4 years. And what will life be without it? And like the second I let go, the next like 6 months, dude, I trained so hard it wasn't even funny. Because it wasn't for a show. It wasn't for anyone else. There was this like lightness all of a sudden of like, no, I'm just here to do this because I love to do this. It's not to follow through for others. It's not to, And I think, when you mentioned earlier, like we get in this doing stuff for others too, when we're in the wrong communities, right? And I was around a community that, not saying all bodybuilders are this way, but I think it can be common that they're wired with that same like, well, no, I said I was going to do it at some point. And because I was around that, I continued to feed off of it. And I was like, well, if everyone else is doing that, I'm going to really make, I thought I already did a pretty good job of that. But if everyone else is holding that card, then I'm definitely going to like, I'm not going to be the one that's caving.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, like that's, when I let go of that, like I still pose to this day, multiple days a week, like, because I love it.
Yeah.
And I will never compete. I know that now. Like I will never step on stage, but I still pose almost daily like I'm going to, because I just simply love the act of bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Like bodybuilding is not the act of stepping on stage and competing. Right. Bodybuilding is the act of looking in the mirror and bettering yourself.
Yeah.
Being able to critique this, that, saying, I want that to change, and knowing what you need to take ownership of to create that change, you know? And I could have all of that without ever experiencing the pressure that came from stepping on stage, the external environment that brought into my training. So yeah, I think that's like my story of martyrdom.
I appreciate you sharing. What I'm hearing from you is like you just started doing it for yourself.
Yeah, man.
And I so resonate with, we often create these stories of like what certain things mean and, what it'll say about us, right? And what I'm hearing a little bit is like, doing the bodybuilding for external reasons was like, it was some story about like who that meant you were or how people would perceive you, and I've been in so many versions of that. And I think that's what's like, stopped me from opening up or sharing or being honest about how I'm feeling or, sharing with other people, which ultimately brings more intimacy, connectedness by revealing your experience. And it's something else we were talking about today with social media, but also just life is like our intention. Like, why are we doing the things? And it's tough, but it's interesting how often we create our own suffering by like chasing these, hungry ghosts. So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you got through that.
Appreciate that, man.
Are you open to talking any about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm a firm believer in the more we talk about that kind of stuff, the more everyone can understand that it's a part of human life, not something that's like just part of experiences of those that have something wrong with them or anything like that.
Yeah. I think, man, I think it's such a spectrum. And I know, especially like my teenage years and my early 20s, like I really struggled with depression, and I still struggle with anxiety today. I think on some level, it's something we all struggle to navigate. I'm curious, what was that like for you to like actually check yourself in, to actually, it sounds like there was a big acknowledgement point of like, oh, this is beyond what I'm capable of? Or
I think actually it makes me think of a conversation we were having earlier. We were talking about the difference between the word surrender and acceptance. And I think that there was just this real acceptance of like, yeah, you're in over your head, man.
Yeah.
Like, you may wake up tomorrow and have thoughts that are not you, that may lead to things that are not reversible, and I think that's one of those things that's like really hard for people who either haven't acknowledged mental health struggles or haven't experienced it yet, to understand that feeling of like, what do you mean my thoughts aren't going to be my own? What do you mean like I would take an action that's not actually genuinely who I am? Like, I've seen it. I've lost people to it, like the only explanation is that they were not acting themselves in that moment, And so, yeah, like there was just, to me, so when I checked in, one of the things that they do with you is they work through a worksheet with you. Because this isn't a situation where you're setting up regular counseling with the person you're seeing. It's a one-time visit.
Yeah.
And they work through this, emergency action plan worksheet with you and send it with you so that you kind of have a plan of action to go through should you find yourself in a tough situation again mentally. And the last question on the sheet that she asked me was, at this point in time, what do you feel is most worth living for? And the only thing that I could answer was, I just want the opportunity to fulfill my potential to be maintained. Like, I'm not even in a place right now where I can step into actualizing my potential. I can't manage that. But like, if I'm gone, the opportunity to bring my full potential to light is gone as well. And I think that like that was a real turning point. I think that also started to like connect me back to things outside of myself. Because when we suffer, it can become very lonely.
Yeah.
And that thought of like me being here to bring my potential to reality started to remind me that like there's other people that are involved in that. Like that's not a selfish endeavor. Like if I'm not here, then what if someone's life doesn't change for the positive that was supposed to or could have if I had been there to interact with them along the way. So yeah, I think like that question was true. I mean, that's why my business's name is Actualized Potential Wellness Coaching. Like that moment for me is really a crux of the biscuit in terms of like that's why I train the way I train. You know, like the idea that I at some point go away without having experienced my fulfilled potential possibility is just like it irks me.
Yeah, I mean, I think something you said is you may have a thought that's not you, and I think that's the challenging part is we have thoughts and we have feelings that are not us, you know, and this has really informed the way that I do my coaching, and this like life journey that I'm on is healing is really coming back to wholeness. And I used to struggle with this word healing and things like therapy because where I grew up, it kind of felt taboo or like something was wrong with you. But once I understood that, yeah, the definition of healing is actually coming back to wholeness. I think that in our world, you know, in ways we were talking about like, oh man, what a good problem to have that, you know, social media is, you know, scrolling too much.
Yeah.
It's like such an issue. And with that is like, yeah, we have all of these inputs and these things and we're more disconnected to nature and our natural way of operating. But it's coming back to wholeness and there can be a number of reasons that we might have these thoughts or these feelings. And I think that for all of us, it's valid, whatever we're feeling. If we're sad, if we're happy, if we're angry, if we're annoyed, like it's valid that we feel that way. Like that's our experience. And also, you know, knowing or having a way to separate that or create space from that is so important. And I think a lot of people maybe don't have that, don't have the resources or whatever. And I know for me and like the work that I'm doing is asking for help, you know, knowing that it's okay to ask for help. And I think that's the hardest thing. And it's cool to hear that you did that, you know, but I think even for, it can be such a different scale. It's interesting that we're having this conversation. I didn't know this about you. And earlier today I shared something that I'm going through and I'm struggling with. And, you know, not something I'm ready to share publicly. And you were like, oh, I appreciate you being open. And it's kind of along that same vein of like, yeah, so there's so much suffering when you do things alone. And I think as men, but not just men, this is true of everyone, but like we can have that lone wolf mentality or we don't want to burden others or we don't want people to know that we're not good. We like we have to put on this facade and like, there actually can be so much freedom and like asking for help and getting support and like letting that energy move.
Yeah, man. I think that it makes me think of like, I remember when I first got into the gym and I thought strength was the guys that moved the big weights around. And then when I got into training more and more, I realized that people with true strength were the people that came in and tried to move weights that intimidated them, regardless of what the number was.
It's relative.
Yeah. And so I think it's the same thing, you know, like with you can create that bubble that suffering just magnifies in, you know, but even just sharing in suffering starts to, you know, disperse the magnitude of it, I think.
Yeah, so what was that process like for you? So you checked yourself in, they gave you the questionnaire, and then like what was the journey of working through this?
So I went, following that, I was partnered with, I did find a therapist, a long-term therapist, and worked with him for, gosh, it would have been about a year, 12 months of weekly the first 6 months and then bi-weekly the second 6 months. And really it was, I think, deconstructing a lot of unhealthy survival mechanisms that I had created in suffering through the bodybuilding stuff.
Yeah.
I was not, I had developed very unhealthy relationship habits, whether it was romantically, friendships, like, because it had become so one-sided. And I was like coming at it from the viewpoint of like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
That means I got to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish,
Right.
you know?
Achieving.
Yeah. So there was a lot of rewiring around priorities and what actually is fulfilling. A lot of reflection of like, why were you pursuing bodybuilding? Like what? Because it's not all bad. Like what about it was something that you can take and continue to pursue from other things, and what are some of the shadow sides of it that maybe it's cool to understand you have the capacity to operate in that realm, but like we don't really need that on a super regular basis in today's day and age.
Right.
You know, I think one of the other honestly biggest parts of that process was the first 12 months that I was becoming a trainer at the Fort Collins Club, and where I really, over the next 4 to 5 years, became super successful and established a full client base, and people knew me really well in that building. And I think that, you know, I don't know how this hits people, but the thought that I have is like, there were people in those 12 months that thought I was the coach that had it all together, that I was the dude that was on top of it, right? But I was going through it too.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like, and you know, for reflection, maybe I could have shared that more with people, but at the same time, we've had conversations already about the right time to share your process and what you're going through. But I think that for a long time in the bodybuilding realm, it was comparative suffering.
Yeah.
It was like, if I can suffer more than you, I'm a bigger badass.
Right.
Instead of just saying like, hey, we can do this together.
Yeah.
And like, we're actually more capable together. We have a larger capacity together. We can do bigger, cooler things together. You know, I'm not saying that like inevitably I don't have my own pursuits and you have yours or whatever, but
Yeah. Do you feel like, you know, before that point and kind of getting through that and being successful, like what were you searching for? Was it like a sense of purpose or like self-worth, or, you know, was there anything that you felt like you were chasing, or maybe, you know, there was a void somewhere that led to the like, okay, I'm gonna suffer more?
So I very much remember where the suffering mindset started. I've always been a big fan of athletes and like the stories of athletes that come from nothing and become like one of the greatest at what they do of all time. I think that from a very young age, I was just like intrigued by that. It's like, there's something I can learn from these people. And through watching those people, I started to ask myself like, well, I've had a pretty easy upbringing. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect, but like, I didn't have to wonder where food was coming from. Like, I wasn't around violence or drugs, or, you know, like, it was pretty kosher. I started to input this thought process of like, the only way I could possibly get to be as motivated as them, have the drive that they had, was to suffer. Because that's why they were so motivated, is because they were trying to get away from the suffering. But I didn't understand what the suffering felt like, so I needed to do more of it.
Yeah.
Whereas like now, I would say that it's not that my process has changed, but the mindset around, it's not suffering, it's discomfort. Discomfort is enjoyable, like it's fun, versus suffering is meant to be negative, right? Like that's the whole point of suffering. And instead of this, the more I suffer, the better I am, but the more negative I am, the more discomfort I can withstand, the more fun I'm having, the more capable of a human I'm becoming. Like, that's stepping into your higher, like that is fun.
What do you think? Well, there's a couple of things that stick out to me. I think this is what's so interesting about any struggle or wounding or conditioning that we have, whatever we want to call it, is like, yeah, you could grow up in a quote unquote ideal, normal family, and you're like, you know, and then you have this story of like, oh, I'm not suffering enough, or I don't deserve it, or, you know, whatever. And so it doesn't always have to be these big traumatic things. But what do you feel like the suffering was going to get you? Like, why did you feel like you needed to suffer? Like, what was on the other side of that?
I imposed the thought process that the more I suffered, the what's the right word that I should use? Like bulletproof. I felt impenetrable. Like it was like, well, shoot, if I can voluntarily put myself through all this, like
Yeah.
there's literally nothing you could do to me that's going to make me feel more uncomfortable.
So what did that give you? Was it like safety? Because if you're impenetrable, does it mean like no one can hurt you, or like? Because I think with all of this, there's typically something deeper. You
Yeah.
know?
I think one of the things I always felt about myself, coming back to like being the lean athlete, is like I was always athletic, but I was always lean and skinny. And like I was always teased for being scrawny. And like, if I was up against an athlete that was more naturally built, then it was like this joke of like, well, yeah, you're athletic, but like you're not as strong as he is, you know? So I think that there was truly like this search for an external view of me,
Belonging.
of like, what physical thing could I have that person do that would make him not in his realm?
Yeah.
I just wanted to be, I was in search of, and I think that this is still part of it, but it's shifted in terms of what the driver is, of like, yeah, put me in a physical situation that you think is going to challenge most people. And like, I'm not saying it's not going to challenge me, but like, I'm going to do it. Just a real like raw sense of being able to provide for yourself, like I'm not wishing this upon myself, but like when I go hit trails by myself, like not looking for wildlife, but like there are thoughts of like, well, if you come across what you come across, you have some gear, but at the end of the day, like if they make a move, it's you versus them. Right. It's either you or them. Like, yeah, just a real like base necessity of like I can provide for myself. I think is like I never wanted to feel in physical lack. I never wanted to go to need my body and be like, oh, I can't.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you went through that process, you completed with the therapist. What is it like now for you? Do you find yourself ever, getting back to that place or close to that place? Do you feel like you have more tools to support yourself, or do you feel like you've just completely surpassed that way of being?
No, I think honestly it's a constant battle. I think one of the things now that is more a part of the story and more a driving factor is what I do with that self that I create physically. It's not enough to say that like I've unlocked or am unlocking my physical potential.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that self doing to impact the world? Because like that's a pretty selfish existence if it's just for me about experiencing what I can do with myself.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think that like some people that's enough and they base their existence off that, and I'm not going to knock that. But like for me, I feel called that like there's this next level of taking that self and impacting. I have a gladiator quote tattooed on my body. What we do in life echoes in eternity. And I think that, yeah, there's now this challenge of, okay, how does what I do with my physical self echo? And I think right now the thought process is about as defined as like inspiring others that they can do more than they think they can do right now. Because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if there weren't people like that along the way that made me think like, well, what? Like, oh, could I do? Am I doing what I could be doing?
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. One of my mentors, Trevor Boehm, has this quote. I'm probably going to butcher it a little bit, but it says, "Your greatest gifts grow in the garden of your wounds." And I think that's so true. And I think anyone who is like searching for their purpose, that's a good place to start. Which purpose is such this like big, grand, elusive thing. I think there's a lot of layers, but in one capacity, like what have you struggled with? What have you overcome? What skill have you created out of that? And I still resonate with what you're saying. And like, even the work I'm doing, I think that part of this conversation feels really important because I have this tension point between like being a life coach and a men's coach and leadership coach and like sharing a lot of the tools I've navigated and ways of operating. And a lot of times working with my clients, especially one-on-one, they're like, wow, like you make it sound so easy, or like how do you have that perspective, or like whatever. And it's because I've been there and I got through it, and I'm not in that pain. I'm in a new pain, you know? And I think there is a time and a place where like, when I'm holding space for clients, that's what I'm doing. Like I'll share experiences. But I was sharing with you, I'm in this 6-month men's group leadership program with a new mentor, and it's like heavy. Like we did some shadow work, and it's like deep stuff, and we're going to go on these retreats and really like uncover, our wounding and, things that come up and what's holding us back. And, but me going through that, like me going through my hard times and my challenges and relationship struggles and like questioning myself and suffer, like physically, like suffering, like hurting emotionally, being sad, anxious, feeling alone. That's why I do the work that I do, And so it's cool to hear that being your motivation, because my background is in fitness, and I feel like, again, that was just the vessel for me. It's still, my mission was the same, my purpose of like, I want to help people be the best version of themselves. Back then it was more for fitness. Now I'm helping them, learn more about themselves, heal parts of themselves, that sort of thing. And it makes sense too how that gives you that like strong anchor point of like the tough days and checking yourself and why am I showing up, because you want to help people where they were or where you were.
Yeah, man, I think that's truly like with clients that I've worked with, I think the most incredible experience as a coach is when you see that moment of self-coaching take place, where they're not like denying that they're struggling. They're not trying to make up some story about what's going on. Like just watching them acknowledge their situation and step into it. I think only, there's just something about being a coach. Like I don't feel ethical about being a coach in the area that I am if I'm not going out there and doing that on a daily basis. I've never wanted the coach that has read all about it.
Yeah.
Like if you have, that's a nice bonus.
Right.
But I'd prefer the coach that like does it actively on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Because like you said, that's where you get those intricacies of being able to connect with someone else's experience of like, I know exactly what you feel like in that moment. We have a mutual buddy that I connected you with who told me a little bit about,
I just was thinking about him. So
his experience, and like just being willing to be one of the people that tells someone they can versus that they can't. And like that comes from, how many coaches told me that I was just going to be the skinny, lean kid growing up, and that like that was my body type and there was nothing I could do about it. Like I just wanted someone that told me I could.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something we all need, but especially men. When you went through the initiation, my first program, we go through these archetypes, and the final one is the king. And part of the king, if you embody the king, is calling forward the next generation, like speaking life into them, And when I first learned about that as an archetype, like the king doesn't hold back. He doesn't like, belittle other people. And I think the way this could relate, I remember, growing up playing sports, and you'd have these coaches who kind of like wouldn't give you a compliment, wouldn't tell you anything good. It was all from that negative kind of scarcity, fear, and not realizing how much as like a impressionable teenager, like you want to hear that. It's like a different father figure that you're like, you just want to be affirmed, you know? And someone who is truly embodying the king archetype, like the integrated masculine, will do that. Will call forward other people, and it's something that keeps coming up, but it's something I really try to do. And it's funny, in the current rounds of the initiation men's group last week, we talked about the magician. and owning your gifts is part of that. But one thing that came up was like receiving compliments, and it's something we really struggle with as men, is like, can we receive? And so like I really try to make a point through that, is like, and so I ended up going around kind of organically of like, I don't know you that well, but I see this in you. Does that land? And they're like, whoa, that it does.
I can see
Like,
a group of men being very like, oh, I don't, this
like,
is uncomfortable.
like they felt it, but I think they were also taken aback that I could see that in them.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm a very sensitive person and I'm like very observant. So it is like a superpower of mine, but also I think it's more obvious than you think, but people just don't share that, you know? And so, yeah, it's cool to hear that that's like a framework for you to really like speak life into whoever you're around.
Yeah, man, I think we all have our own gifts, you know. I wouldn't dare try to coach the way Taylor coaches, you know. And yeah, I think that through, you know, things that are just me combined with the experiences I've chose to go through, I have a innate ability to help people understand connecting, pushing their physical self with self-development, you know. I don't think you can do one without the other if you're really in the thing to do the thing.
Yeah, which is, I mean, interesting what you talked about, all of this relating. I mean, I have this belief that for most of us, maybe it's a bias because of the people I spend time with, but like physical training, exercise, athletics is like the entry point into personal growth, healing, enlightenment, you know, whatever we want to call it. And vice versa. Some people might get there through meditation or like intellectually learning about psychology, but I think at some point you have to integrate the two.
Yes.
You know, physical growth is spiritual growth, is personal growth, is like, and they're all connected. And that's why, like, I mean, for me, it was a natural progression into more of the life coaching. But anytime I mentor some like fitness coaches as they're getting started, and I always, again, speak life into them. I'm like, look, you're a life coach. You don't have to call yourself that. You don't have to tell anyone that. You know, you don't have to like take some certification, but like if you are going to train people physically or nutrition, like it's going to be deeper. It's the sets and the reps and the program is the easy part.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. Like the amount of times in a training session I've pushed someone, and they're like, well, I don't think I can do this, right? They do it, and it's followed by just tears, right? And the tears aren't like they hurt themselves or what. The tears are like this acknowledgement that they now realize that they could do something that they weren't giving themselves credit for.
The bullshit story they had about themselves, about how incapable they were, they just shattered.
And it's really sad because now you have to acknowledge that you've left life up to this point on that table. Yeah. That's really sad. Like I have experienced that moment. I've watched others look at the mirror and the tears well up. And that's exactly the thought process. It's like, holy shit, if I had done everything up to this point, to this level, holy shit.
Yeah, because it's not just there. It's in business and relationships.
Yes, it very much directly is. It's not. No one has to say anything. Yeah. The second you unlock that part of your brain in a physical sense, you know it could have been translated to a work task or a life task or habits, whatever it is.
And the beautiful thing is now there's a new opportunity.
That's the other half of the tears, right? Is how beautiful life gets from here moving forward, knowing that you now have access to that part of yourself.
Yeah, this is beautiful. So what is it like you working with clients? Because I know you coach them in fitness. You've also mentioned some mindset stuff, but what is your process for helping people? Yeah, man, I really pride myself on the fact that it's a personalized process. I don't have a cookie cutter, like this is what you're going to get when you start coaching with me. Some of the common points is I'm with my clients Monday through Friday. Like during the day, you have access to me in a messaging app. And that's truly like the place that I see my one-on-one clients that get the most out of our work together abuse me in the good sense, right? I think some people, when they first look into us working together, they have this assumption based on work with other coaches that like when I say Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., it's like, yeah, but only if you message me, or like give me a day to get back to you. It's like every day, Monday through Friday from 7 to 8 a.m., I'm messaging you
to instigate the day. You're not getting away from me. You're not hiding. Like we're working together. We're in process. And there's times when clients like message me at 8 a.m. like, I've kind of been poking around the house for the last hour trying to avoid my workout. Like it is the moment. Like like that's what I love.
Yeah.
That's my favorite that I couldn't do when I was working with people in person at the gym.
Right.
Because it was just on to the next person. When people now like reach out in that moment and we get to tackle that moment together. And then 2 hours later, there's a Voxer back of like, okay, I just finished my workout.
Yeah.
And now I'm on to my work day. And like, and not just that and celebrating it, but like, hey, okay, I want you to remember how you felt this morning. I want you to remember how you feel after your workout this morning. I want you to store that memory as vividly as possible so that you have evidence to draw on the next time you have one of these mornings, what you're capable of taking yourself to yourself. You don't need to reach out to Zach at some point, like, because you have the evidence of what takes place. So you don't need me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that daily communication Monday through Friday is really where the bulk of the coaching happens.
Yeah.
I also do bi-weekly Zoom calls with people I'm in one-on-one work with. I also it's not something that everyone chooses. It's an optional add-on that doesn't change the price, but I send mindset tracks every Monday that are personalized.
Nice.
And the way I kind of phrase it to people is like, think of your own personalized YouTube video that's just the audio. But yeah, like it's your name. I'm talking about what you're working on right now. I pair music with it that kind of goes with the tone of what's being spoken about in the track. And people get to keep those. So if you work with me for 6 months, like cool, you have a library of 26 5 or so minute tracks that you'll forever be able to go listen to. In those moments where maybe you feel a little challenged or feel like you're in a little self-doubt, like that's a tool I utilize heavily. I love YouTube for that. Like the fact that I can go find one of my favorite mindset dudes like Jocko that we talked about earlier. Like, cool, I don't need to go pay a coach a ton of money.
Yeah.
Like I can go find Jocko talking about exactly what I need right now. That's what those tracks are meant to be for people. So yeah, that's kind of the, they're in all of that. Like, yes, we can talk workout programming, we can talk nutrition, we can talk numbers behind nutrition, we can talk all that.
I love that that's not the answer you gave. The answer you gave was the connection. It's a relationship. And I think from my experience, like that's what breeds success, because most people know they need to work out more or they need to eat better. It's why don't they do that? And yeah, we could get nuanced with like, there's this training program and that, but yeah, that's what's cool, and it just reminds me. So I still have like 7 fitness clients.
Cool.
That I don't promote. I think I'll do it as long as they want to work with me.
Some
of them,
absolutely.
It's been like 4 years, and I'm like, what? You're still working with me? Like, what's going on? And yeah, I'm not that invested in the sense of like all the other things, because it's kind of just programming.
Yeah.
But I've built a relationship for so long
Yes.
that they trust me and they can reach out to me and they do have access. And yeah, man, I think that's like, we just need more connection, more human connection, more relatedness. And so yeah, that just speaks volumes to who you are and the impact that you have, that's where you lead. Cause yeah, that's, if I was looking for a fitness coach, I don't think that's maybe what people would think of first, but that's really what I would start with. Because like you can find, honestly, there's enough free programs out there to get the results you need.
I'll be frank with people, dude, who are listening. Like, you want programming, AI exists now.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, you could go ask AI I've done it. Just because when AI started to come out, I was like, I'm interested.
Yeah.
On like how much someone who doesn't have my knowledge could get out of AI in my area of expertise. And dude, like ChatGPT will put together a workout program for you for whatever you like, and like intricate level programming too, But yeah, like you're not gonna have anyone to help you deal with like why you're not doing the programming.
Totally. So. Zach, man, this has been amazing.
Yeah, agreed.
Any last words of wisdom for the audience or anything you want to share?
Yeah, man, I think I don't change this. I say pretty much the same thing whenever I get the opportunity to share a last little tidbit, but I just, I feel I'm called to share with people and remind people that they can do whatever they put their mind to, right? Like, yes, for me, a lot of that evidence has come in the physical realm. But on a daily basis, I'm reminded how that proof in the physical realm translates to me doing stuff I didn't think I could do in other aspects of life as well. So, yeah, you can do whatever you put your mind to. Don't sell yourself short. Like, the world needs that best level version of you.
I love that. I'm just going to add on to it, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Even if, I know we talked about earlier, maybe if you're hurting, but even if you're just like, you're not sure, there's people that want to help and can guide you in the right direction. So, where can people find you, follow you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, man. So Instagram is in terms of all the different social platforms, that's where you can find me. It's just at my first and last name, Zach Fagerberg. I'll be totally transparent with people that I'm not super active there right now. We've had conversations around it today. I'm just very, I think, present right now and focused on being present in life, and just truthfully acknowledge that that takes away from that. That being said, if you DM me there, like I check it semi-periodically. So just patience if it seems like it's been a couple days or a week. I do also have a website, just apwellnesscoaching.com. People can find and connect with me there. There's a little bit more about me and that kind of thing. But those are the two avenues. Yeah, if you're interested in talking more about what we've talked about today, or something resonated with you, I'm the guy who, like we said, just wants to connect. I'm not here to hold bars out of like, well, we need to start coaching before we start talking. Like, I just want to connect with other awesome people. So
Beautiful. Thanks so much. I'll put all that in the show notes. And Zach, thanks so much for your time.
Taylor, man, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.